Sometimes, in the midst of complete devastation, something inexplicable happens. A single house stands untouched while everything around it turns to ash. No logical explanation, no scientific reasoning that fully satisfies just faith, prayer, and a mystery that challenges everything we think we know about protection and divine intervention. In 2018, a wildfire tore through Paradise, California, with such ferocity that it became known as the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in the state's history. The campfire, as it was officially named, consumed nearly 19,000 structures in a matter of hours. Entire neighborhoods vanished. Schools, churches, businesses, all reduced to rubble and charred remains. The sky turned black at midday. Families fled with only the clothes on their backs, many not even having time to grab a single photograph or keepsake. But in the middle of this apocalyptic landscape, one house remained, completely intact, untouched by flames. Surrounded by a sea of destruction, it stood like an island of hope in an ocean of despair. The images went viral almost immediately. News outlets from around the world shared the photographs, and people couldn't stop asking the same question. How was this possible? The family who lived in that house, the Oldens, had a simple answer that confounded skeptics and inspired believers. Faith. They had prayed. They had asked for divine protection. And somehow, impossibly, their home was spared while their neighbors' homes were completely destroyed. November 8, 2018 started like any other autumn morning in Paradise. The air was crisp, the sky was clear, and nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. By 6:30 a.m., a spark ignited in nearby Polga Canyon. Within minutes, driven by powerful winds reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour, that spark became a monster. The campfire was born, and it moved with terrifying speed, consuming the equivalent of one football field every single second. Evacuation orders came rapidly, but for many, they came too late. The fire moved faster than people could drive. Cars were abandoned on roadsides, their owners fleeing on foot. The smoke was so thick that visibility dropped to mere feet. The Olden family received their evacuation notice and made the agonizing decision to leave everything behind. Before they fled, they did something that might seem simple but would later become profoundly significant. They prayed. They asked God to protect their home, to watch over their property, and to spare what they had built together. Then they drove away, not knowing if they would ever see their house again. For 3 days, the fire raged. Emergency responders fought valiantly, but the fire seemed unstoppable. By the time it was finally contained on November 25th, over 153,000 acres had burned. 85 people had lost their lives, and Paradise, a town of nearly 27,000 people, had effectively ceased to exist. When the smoke finally cleared enough for aerial surveys to begin, photographers and news crews flew over Paradise to document the scope of destruction. What they captured was heartbreaking beyond words. block after block of nothing but foundations and chimneys. The skeletal remains of what had once been a vibrant community. But then, in the middle of one particular neighborhood, a photographer noticed something that didn't make sense. One house, completely intact. The grass around it was green. The structure showed no fire damage. It looked as though it had been transported from a different dimension and dropped into this hellscape. The contrast was jarring and impossible to ignore. In every direction around the Olden home, there was nothing but destruction. The houses on either side completely gone. Across the street, foundations only. Down the block, total devastation. But there, like a miracle made visible, stood this one house. The white exterior walls were clean. The roof was intact. Even the wooden deck appeared undamaged. It defied every understanding of how wildfires work, how they spread, and what they consume. Fire experts were called in to study the phenomenon. They noted that the house had some fire-resistant features, metal roofing, enclosed eaves, and fire-resistant siding. But so did other houses in Paradise, houses that had burned to the ground. The surrounding vegetation wasn't particularly cleared away. There was no extraordinary defensible space that might explain why this house survived while others didn't. By all conventional wisdom and fire science, this house should have burned. Meteorologists examined weather patterns from that day. Firefighters reviewed their response logs. Engineers studied photographs and tried to reconstruct exactly what happened. And while they could point to small factors that might have helped, none of them could explain the complete picture. When the Oldens were finally able to return to Paradise and saw their home standing alone in the rubble, they wept. But their tears were not just tears of relief, they were tears of awe and gratitude. They immediately shared their story with anyone who would listen, crediting their prayers and their faith for the miracle they had witnessed. The family had been Christians for decades, active in their church and community. They believed deeply in the power of prayer, not as a magic formula, but as a genuine communication with a God who cares about his children. On that morning when they evacuated, they didn't just lock their doors and leave. They laid their hands on the walls of their home and spoke prayers of protection over it. In the weeks following the fire, the Olden's home became a symbol of hope for the devastated community. People drove from miles away just to see it, to take photographs, to feel encouraged that perhaps not everything was lost. The family opened their home to neighbors who had lost everything, providing shelter, food, and comfort. They saw their survival not as mere good fortune, but as a responsibility, a calling to help others and to share the faith that they believed had saved them. Critics and skeptics were quick to dismiss the story as coincidence or as attributing supernatural significance to what could be. Explained by building materials and luck, but the Oldens never wavered in their conviction. They acknowledged that their house had some fire-resistant features, but they firmly believed those features alone couldn't account for what happened. Their story sparked intense debate online and in communities of faith around the world. Some saw it as proof of God's existence and his involvement in human affairs. Others saw it as confirmation bias, humans finding patterns where none exist. But regardless of interpretation, one fact remained indisputable. This house survived when statistical probability and expert opinion suggested it should not have. The tension between scientific explanation and faith-based interpretation is at the heart of this story. From a purely scientific standpoint, several factors likely contributed to the house's survival. The metal roof was crucial. Metal doesn't burn and can reflect heat. The fire-resistant siding helped prevent ember penetration. The enclosed eaves meant there were fewer entry points for flames. Additionally, there may have been subtle wind patterns that day that diverted the worst of the fire around that particular location. But here's what troubles even the experts. Those same features existed on other properties that burned completely. Paradise had building codes specifically designed for fire-prone areas. Many homes had similar or even superior fire-resistant construction, yet they burned. Believers point to this gap as evidence of divine intervention. They argue that God can work through natural means, using the fire-resistant materials as instruments of his protection, while also controlling variables we can't measure: wind patterns, ember distribution, even the intensity of heat at crucial moments. In this view, prayer doesn't violate natural law. It invokes the author of natural law to arrange circumstances in specific ways. The debate ultimately comes down to worldview. Those who believe in an active, intervening God see this as clear evidence of answered prayer. Those who hold to purely naturalistic explanations see it as an improbable but not impossible confluence of fortunate circumstances. The Olden house isn't the only documented case of seemingly miraculous protection from disaster. Throughout history, there have been numerous accounts of structures, families, and individuals being spared from destruction in ways that defy explanation. In the 2003 Cedar Fire in Southern California, another home stood completely unscathed, while the surrounding area was devastated. The owners had prayed specifically for protection. Similar stories emerged from the 2007 Witch Creek Fire, where individual homes survived in otherwise obliterated neighborhoods, often with families claiming prayer as their protection. During World War II, there are numerous accounts of divine protection that have been documented and verified. One famous case involved the bombing of London, where a particular church was surrounded by destruction, but remained standing despite being in a heavily targeted area. The congregation had been praying for community protection for months. Skeptics correctly point out that for every story of miraculous survival, there are countless tragedies where faithful people prayed but were not spared. This is perhaps the most difficult theological question. Why are some protected while others perish? The Oldens themselves acknowledge this tension. They don't claim to know why their home was spared while their neighbors' homes burned. They simply testify to what they experienced and leave the larger questions in God's hands. The survival of the Olden house had profound psychological and spiritual effects that rippled far beyond paradise. For survivors of the campfire, seeing that house standing became a symbol of resilience and hope. In the darkest moments of grief and loss, that image reminded people that recovery was possible, that not everything was lost, that beauty could still exist amid ashes. For people of faith around the world, the story reinforced their beliefs about prayer and divine care. It became evidence they could point to when their own faith wavered. Churches shared the story in sermons. Prayer groups used it as encouragement. The image of that single house standing became as iconic in some Christian circles as any biblical story of deliverance. The years following the campfire have been marked by slow, painful rebuilding. Paradise has been working to restore itself, but it's a different town now. Many survivors chose not to return, the trauma too great to face. But others, including the Oldens, have stayed committed to rebuilding not just structures, but community and hope. The Olden house has been featured in documentaries, news specials, and even academic discussions about disaster resilience. The family has used their platform to advocate for better fire prevention, improved building codes, and support for disaster survivors. They see their survival as carrying a responsibility to help others. This brings us to the profound question at the heart of this story. Does faith actually protect? Can prayer influence physical events? Is there a God who responds to human appeals for help, or is the universe indifferent to our hopes and fears? Those who believe in the power of prayer point to countless personal experiences beyond the Olden house. They share stories of healing, provision, protection, and intervention that they cannot explain except through divine action. Skeptics counter that faith provides psychological benefits: reduced stress, increased resilience, better decision-making, and these natural effects might explain some survival outcomes without requiring supernatural intervention. But perhaps the most honest answer is that we don't know. We can't design an experiment to test whether prayer influences wildfire behavior. We're left with testimony, with mystery, and with the freedom to interpret according to our deepest convictions about the nature of reality. What we can say with certainty is that faith provides meaning, hope, and resilience in the face of disaster. Whether or not it changes external circumstances, it unquestionably changes internal ones. The Oldens faced the same trauma as their neighbors, but their faith gave them a framework for processing that trauma, for finding purpose in survival, and for moving forward with hope. As we close this extraordinary story, we're left with powerful images and even more powerful questions. A single house standing amid total devastation, a family's unwavering faith in the face of skepticism. The eternal tension between scientific explanation and spiritual meaning. The Olden family's story reminds us that in our darkest moments, hope can survive. Whether that hope is rooted in faith, in human resilience, in the love of community, or in all of these together, it is real and powerful. Their house stands as a monument, not just to what was spared, but to what is possible when we refuse to give up, when we dare to believe that even in the midst of fire, something beautiful can remain untouched. If you found this story as moving as we did, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Do you believe in divine protection? Have you ever experienced something that seemed miraculous? We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our explorations of faith, mystery, and the extraordinary events that challenge our understanding of the world. Thank you for watching, and may you find hope and protection in whatever lies ahead.